There are some games that I like to revisit seasonally or during a particular time of year. It's not that you can't replay them all year round, but something about delving into certain worlds at a different time feels wrong to me. The same sort of vibe that you get from people that leave their Christmas decorations up until February. It is the start of September, and all I've wanted to do is to delve back into Half-Life 2. Even though I already know everything that happens, this game has a very unsettling hold on me, and I keep wanting to go back and experience it again, even if at this point it has been a few years since I touched it last. Today, we're going to break down the eerie ambience of Half-Life 2, and why to this day, it's very difficult to find something that compares to it. Before we get started, hi, my name is Angelica, and it seems that we've been reading our Elder Scrolls too close to the sun, as we have somehow amassed 50,000 subscribers. I'm so grateful to be able to share my content and ideas with you guys. Big welcome to all the newcomers, and thank you so much. So, let's start with why I go back to this game in autumn or fall. The obvious point is that the game appears to be set during fall time, and you can see this in the bright orange leaves that are in a pile surrounding the bare trees that they'd fallen off. The skies are grey and the world looks cold. The other thing that's probably a bit more personal for me is that the beginning of the game reminds me a lot of the beginning of the school year. You have a bunch of depressed people in uniform all heading in one direction. There's people waiting there for you to tell you where to go or sort you to your classes, and even though the place that you arrive at is a train station, the long dark hallways with the doors to the different rooms sort of remind me of my own school. The chipped paint on the walls, the sense that you're being watched all the time, the discipline chair. What, you didn't have a discipline chair in your school? Then of course, this time of year feels most appropriate to go back to Half-Life 2 because of the kind of game that it is. Now, it's not a horror game in the traditional sense, but there are elements to it that are so uncomfortable and terrifying, which make it the ideal experience just in time for Halloween. So, what are these elements? What is this eerie ambience? First of all, let's talk about the soundtrack and lack thereof. Now, what I mean by that is the game does have a brilliant soundtrack, but most of the time you don't hear any music at all. Instead, you're left alone with the sound of your own footsteps, the wind, city ambience, or even the wails of the zombies. The absence of music throughout most of the game make it a lonely, isolating experience, and yet it provokes the sense of longing in the same way that liminal spaces do. Now, if you don't know what liminal spaces are, the Wikipedia definition describes them as empty or abandoned places that appear eerie, forlorn, and often surreal. Some people will associate it with unsettling feelings of nostalgia, in the way that you have been here before. It feels uncomfortable to want to go back, but also you can't look away. To me, Half-Life 2 is Liminal Spaces Simulator, as it combines the elements of half-empty rooms with distinct, randomly placed objects, a very specific gritty color palette, and this sort of Eastern European aesthetic that is all too familiar to me. If you've ever been to an Eastern European country, you would have found that the architecture is a lot like that of City 17, or one of the main locations in Half-Life 2. Specifically the tall apartment buildings in that Soviet modernism style, with other smaller details in the environment like a playground between all the tall apartment blocks that tie it all in. Playground at the beginning of the game is a real highlight for me, and I feel that it sets the tone for the rest of the game in a way that's really powerful and memorable. The site around it is unkempt. The buildings are chipping and decaying. There are leaves everywhere just left to rot into the ground, and weeds are taking over the area. You can actually interact with some of the rusted playground equipment like the merry-go-round, and there is nothing lonelier than playing by yourself at a playground. A broken doll that still makes a sound when you pick it up is the only reminder of the life that once was, highlighting the absence of children in this place and the absence of hope. Eeriness comes from the fact that a playground is a place where you would normally hear a lot of commotion, children laughing, but instead you're listening to your own footsteps and the sound of a dystopian, dangerous city in the background. So, while this is the general setting, with the liminal spaces, a sense of isolation and hopelessness, the game actually does a great job to constantly keep you on edge. You see, Half-Life 2 is a mix of a disturbing dystopian world and a first-person shooter action-adventure game. As you're making your way through the game, you will dip in and out of chaotic, action-packed sequences that come with an intense soundtrack. The way that the soundtrack kicks in at the beginning of each of these sequences sends a chill down your spine thanks to the contrast between that and the complete silence from just moments ago. From the beginning, you are constantly reminded that you are in danger, as the Citadel, which looms above the city and disappears into the clouds, far taller than any other building there, is on high alert. They're looking for you. I don't know about you, but there's something about anyone in that particular building being concerned with my whereabouts that just makes me want to disappear. And yet, at times, I would actually feel a bit of relief and comfort when these encounters would start, as it was a nice break from the deafening silence of the world. With all of these dark, sealed-off areas, claustrophobic passages, and dangerous locations that you pass through, there is a lingering sense of being somewhere you're not supposed to be. Kind of how I would imagine it would feel like to go into the warehouse section of a supermarket.
You're not supposed to be in here.
Speaking of doing things that you're not supposed to, this is also the game where I first started exploring my rebellious side as a child. Another really big element that contributes to the eerie atmosphere in this game is the lack of cinematics. Now, there are a couple of sequences in the game that you could equate to cinematics, since you're incapacitated at the time of them occurring, but the game doesn't switch from that first-person view as they happen. It doesn't really take the reins from you at any time, and so you're almost always in control. Cinematics, really, in intense games can be taken as a bit of a breather, a little break from having to do everything, but the lack of them adds to this sense of loneliness and isolation that we talked about earlier. Now, I have decided to save the best for last, and we cannot talk about the eerie ambience of Half-Life 2 without talking about Ravenholm. There's a point in this game, a whole chapter, that famously takes a very dark turn, and if you haven't played this game before and you don't know what to expect, the experience is harrowing. Now, I have played this game before, and I know exactly at which point in the game we get to that stage. To this day, I find it an absolute nightmare to go through, but in the best way possible. Before you actually step into Ravenholm, you are given a bit of a warning. We don't go there anymore. All you can see is just a dark, long passage, and yet nobody really explains why you can't go there. Eventually, you are forced to go through the doomed town of Ravenholm, alone. The place gets a hell of an introduction as the words "We don't go to Ravenholm" appear on your screen and this unsettling soundtrack kicks in. Further adding to your oncoming feelings of dread are the crows that fly overhead, a broken Ravenholm sign on the ground, and somebody's legs hanging from a tree. This is also the first time you're really experiencing the world at nighttime, as prior to this we had the daylight on our side. Ravenholm is its own terrifying plane of oblivion, and as we'd mentioned earlier, the soundtracks don't persist in this game, and so once again there is complete silence which amplifies the sound of the agonizing wails and screams of the zombies that inhabit the town. In the buildings where there is lots of light, all you can see is the gore of the mutilated zombies' bodies as they rise from the floor and start moving at you. Somehow, the fact that a lot of these buildings are wooden sheds or shacks make it that much more disturbing. Outside then, there are plenty of dark alleyways and corners that are perfect hiding spaces for the zombies and headcrabs waiting to ambush you. Amidst all of the chaos, there is a living presence in the town which serves as a way to keep you, the player, grounded as you're passing through this nightmare. And that presence is Father Grigori. He appears several times as you progress through the chapter and offers some help and advice. While it's obvious that he can certainly hold his own, seeing as he has survived there by himself all this time, you realize just how dismal the reality is. He doesn't leave because he doesn't want to leave, and he refers to the zombies as his flock. His flock is subjected to the various traps he invented to continue keeping them at bay, and this is where you hear one of the most petrifying, abysmal sound bites in the history of gaming. Just a warning for headphone users and anyone that might be a little bit sensitive, viewer discretion is advised. There's a lot to unpack here, but first of all, for context, this is the sound that they make when you set them on fire. So imagine the conflicting feelings when you've spent a good bit of your time shooting these guys, cutting them in half, stopping them from tearing you apart, only to then hear the true agony that they're experiencing, and dare I say, even start to feel a bit bad for them. While what they're screaming may sound like alien gibberish, if you reverse the audio, you hear something even more sinister. Once again, just a warning, this is very uncomfortable to hear. The thing with these zombies is they are not actually the risen dead. They are living beings whose bodies were taken over by the head crabs, which has mutated them beyond recognition and made them attack other uncorrupted living beings. When they step into the fire and begin to scream for help, you're reminded there is a shred of consciousness and humanity still left in them, even if they are beyond help. And perhaps this is why Father Grigori, a religious man, refuses to leave. They call for God in these final excruciating moments. He sees it as his mission to relieve them of this pain. That, and he really is rather unhinged. Later on in the chapter, you encounter the horrific, fast zombies, who are the result of a different type of head crab taking over their body. These zombies are even more mutated, having no organs and just their skeleton and muscles. They are very fast. They come right at you, mercilessly, and the specific screams and howls that they emit are just chilling to the bone. You will hear this sound piercing through the silence as you're standing on a rooftop. You hear them climbing up to where you are. You see them jumping in the moonlight. The people that designed this particular chapter really went hard. Now, after leaving you with all of these images, I want to take you back to the beginning of the game. The train station that you arrive at, when you first step outside, the abandoned playground. As you're in these locations, after having played through the game once already, you will start to view the world through a different lens. Everything that we talked about in terms of the ambience at the beginning of the video still stands, but now you also have knowledge of the existence of Ravenholm, and you know that somewhere out there these horrors unfold on a daily basis as Father Grigori contains his flock. Just as an interesting side note, the Ravenholm chapter was so well received and received so much great feedback that they actually planned a whole game based on the return to Ravenholm, which was unfortunately cancelled later on. It is a shame that we never got to see that. The plans were to delve further into the history of Ravenholm, the background of the town, and Father Grigori himself, but I guess there is also some charm in the mystery. So there you have it. The eerie ambience of Half-Life 2 is not only in the things that you see directly in front of you, but they're also in the things that you know are out there, lurking in the darkness, in the shadows, waiting to come at you. And this is why the world in Half-Life 2 is also my favorite dystopian world. I've been thinking about Half-Life 2 a lot recently, and I know it's very different from like the RPG-focused content that we do here normally, but I don't know, I just thought that for the season that we're in, it would be very interesting to talk about it since this was one of my childhood games. I probably played it way too early. I definitely played it way too early, but there you have it. Once again, I just want to thank you all for the overwhelming response on my last video, for all the new subscribers that have come along. I hope you're enjoying the content, and if you're new here, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Be seeing you. Bye!